today's, I don't know, session of product people. Product people is, on one hand, a product managers community where we have weekly events like the one we have today, but we are also a product consultancy. And these are some of our clients with whom we recently worked: Scout24, Tier, Zalando, Moya, Omio. And what we do is to work as interim product managers or product owners. If you need a hands-on work for a limited time basis, usually our projects are from 2 to 12 months, we'll help you with all the real product management work, or also consult you on different projects to help you deliver great products faster. We have a fully distributed team. Legal entity is in Berlin, and many of our clients are also in Germany or Germany first. However, we are located throughout Europe and also India right now. And we're open to work with companies in different places, and of course, working remotely. And today, we have a special guest, Joseph Akoni from LinkedIn. He is a product manager there, and he will share with us how to use effective communication skills for effective product management, and how in general these communication skills can help you do well at your job as a product manager. Thank you, Joseph, and welcome on the stage.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Everybody see that?
Yes, great.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you. So my name is Joseph Akoni. I am a product manager at LinkedIn, also a blogger at P0PM. It's a website I have to help out those who are starting out in the product management space to learn more about tools and resources to help them with their PM career. And I'm going to speak to the topic, as Victoria mentioned, about how to utilize effective communication to facilitate product execution. All right, so a little bit about me. So I am from Miami, Florida. That's where I am right now. I used to be based in the Bay Area, but COVID has caused everybody to move around. So I moved back to Florida. Went to the University of Florida, where I majored in computer engineering. I had 2 minors, one in Spanish and sales engineering. I then went to Georgia Tech, got my master's in electrical and computer engineering, and also minored in business administration. And then I decided that I loved engineering, but I didn't want to code every day for the rest of my life. So actually, when I started working, I still stayed in tech, but I worked in a marketing and business development capacity. Then decided I wanted to get closer to the product. So actually with developing product and building out technology that people could use, decided to pursue the product management role through an MBA. So I went back to school again. I went to Berkeley, where I got my MBA. And through that, I was able to get a couple opportunities, one at Lyft and one at NVIDIA as a product manager. And then I am working full-time right now at LinkedIn as a PM on the identity team. So if you have your LinkedIn profile, my team, we build that out to make sure that members can best represent themselves and to connect them to the best economic opportunity available to them. All right, so throughout my career as a PM, my tenure as a PM, I've always get many questions, right? From people who want to learn more about the role, from students who are investigating different career paths, or people who are preparing for interviews, right? So what are some of these common questions I've gotten? Do you have a technical background, or do you need to have one? Does working from home make the PM role more difficult? What is it like being a PM? How do you decide which metrics to track? Or even, where do the ideas that you develop come from, right? So the question I want to focus on is the second one, or sorry, the middle one, sorry. What is it like being a PM? And I feel the way in which people answer this question has led to a lot of ambiguity on what to expect when people actually get the role, which leads to ambiguity on how to effectively be a PM. So when I've heard this question answered from other PMs, and even myself answering it, there are many answers that come to mind. All right, so how do people respond usually to the question, what is it like being a PM? Some people say it's amazing. I get to research user problems, uncover users' actual needs, and then You get to come up with creative and unique solutions that help them, solve these customer problems. It's so exhilarating. Then it's, I get to work with designers and brainstorm what the visual layout will look like. We get to have 30 different Post-it note colors. Yellow's my favorite. Everything's so colorful. It's amazing. Then there's, I get to come up with metrics to track so I know my product is actually successful. Then there's also, I get to define the exact target market that we tailor the feature to, or even I work with marketing to help develop the right messaging that will resonate with that target market. And then the thing that PMs usually love saying is that they get to launch and see all their hard work in action. And members are congratulating them and their company on the amazing product that they've released. So the next thing I want to do is actually put all these comments on an actual product development timeline. So we have our imaginary 90-day product development timeline, because everything always fits in 90 days, right? Probably usually not, but we have this imaginary 90-day timeline in which we're going to put these comments on. So day one, right? You uncover users' needs and you research and by researching member problems, you're able to actually uncover what their needs are and what solution you can develop. And let's say day 5 to 6, you're brainstorming and you're developing your solution, you're defining that and fine-tuning that target market, and then you're developing metrics that can potentially be tracked to ensure your product is successful. Then you get to, let's say day 7, you're accelerating here, you create your initial designs. Day 12, you're ready to build, you develop the marketing messaging that'll really resonate with your target market to get them to use your product. And then you launch, right? So with this timeline, like, is anybody noticing anything that's wrong with this? Like when you look at it, there's a huge gap, right, between designing that initial solutions, developing your messaging, and then launching, right? So when you say what's wrong with this picture, it's days 13 through 89, right? So what actually happens after you finalize those designs, you've brainstormed the solution, you've spoken with engineering, with all your stakeholders to actually come up with what this will look like, days 13 through 89. Let's talk about what actually goes into days 13 through 89, right? It's day 20, there's an engineering roadblock that creates an unexpected 2-week delay. Day 34, this roadblock is actually going to cost you another 3 weeks, right? Day 36, key stakeholders are on vacation. Day 42, engineering resources being removed from your project because another higher priority project on your team or company has been surfaced. Day 50, engineering resources are given back to you. Day 60, you speak with legal and security, and they add an additional unexpected security requirement to your product plan, which requires an additional 2-week approval process. So at this point, you're just agitated. And then day 70, there's deployment delays due to a global platform issue. So at this point, you're crying. You're not sure what's going on. Everything was perfect prior. Then day 80, another feature bug pops up, and that causes a 3-day delay. Then day 83, there's a typo, and the update requires translations in all languages, which adds another 3 days to the release date. Now, this actually happened to me once. It's pretty embarrassing to have a typo out there, but it happens. We got it fixed, but these things do happen. And then translations are done. Day 86, day 90, you launch, and then you think you're done. But then day 97, you look at your metrics and realize there's an unexpected drop in another team's metric. And you're wondering, oh, do I have to stop the release of my product and bring it back so nobody can actually even view it and use it? Day 100, after further investigation, you realize it was a bug and you do get it fixed. And then now you're officially done after day 100 with this specific iteration. You still have more aspects of that product you want to release. So the question that I want to ask is what actually goes into days 13 through 89, and that is product execution. So when people usually talk about what is it like being a product manager, a lot of them leave out the hard part, right? The strenuous, the aspect of the process that requires a ton of dedication, a ton of time, a ton of commitment, a ton of excellent communication. So days 13 through 89, that product execution, and that's key to really ensuring that you're able to release your product on time and releasing it in a manner in which your members will appreciate the use of it and be able to get the most out of it. So product execution. So days 13 through 89 is product execution. So an idea is only as good as its execution. So that's something you hear a ton when speaking to VCs or folks who are giving ideas or giving tips to those who want to start a business. But this is not just for a startup, right? You should treat every feature that you work on as a product manager as this new idea that you need to execute as relentlessly as you can to ensure that it's released in the best manner possible. So given the all this turmoil that I mentioned in the previous slides that could happen when you're going through this product execution process, the question we can ask ourselves is, what can we do to mitigate any issues or concerns that arise as you're going through this process, as you're dealing with engineering resources being pulled back, or new requirements being added, or bugs popping up, or just different messaging that has to come up. So how do you deal with all this, and what's a way to, or what are ways in which we can mitigate any concerns that actually come across when we're dealing with this product execution process? So what are some tools that we can use to really ensure smooth execution, right? So one of them is just to incorporate all your necessary stakeholders as early as possible, right? So you may need work from another team, and this team may have already allocated all their product design and engineering resources for that quarter. So you have to make sure that you go to them as early as possible to make sure that you can enable them to allocate some of their resources to you so that you can actually reach your product. So for instance, if you need some back-end work from, if you want to display your feature on another team's product, and that's really core to making your feature work and be adopted as quickly as possible, you have to make sure that you're talking to these stakeholders as early as possible to make sure they're on the same page. Because regardless of how amazing your idea could be, they may agree that you have a great product idea, and the fact that it's their collaboration is necessary to ensure the success of it. But if they already have their resources allocated, that's something that you have no control over. The next thing is proper scoping, right? So ensuring that design, engineering, legal, etc., all your stakeholders have all spent enough time determining all the necessary requirements from their parts and from their expertise areas to give you, so as you plan the release, you're actually able to incorporate all the necessary changes needed across all stakeholders to ensure that as you're executing, nothing new pops up. And then there's something that's I feel is most underrated, and is that effective communication with all stakeholders as often and as necessary as possible. So ensuring that the people you communicate with know exactly what's going on, and know any major updates, and you're able to communicate in a cadence that's necessary based on the product that you're working on. So what we're going to focus on from here is the communication aspect. So consistent communication will always lead, or is an aspect of leading to effective communication. So what are some tools that you can use to aid in this effective communication, right? So one of them is the daily product progress update document. So for projects with tight deadlines or projects with potentially high legal consequences, I would recommend this. So for instance, if you're migrating or changing member data, and that requires you to communicate with all the members who are being affected. So for instance, this is something that happened to me recently where I had to work on a member migration project for about almost 300 million members on LinkedIn's platform. We had to change their location data. Some of you may have gotten that email. Sorry, it wasn't the smoothest process, but we had some hiccups, but we were able to finally get it done. So through that process, given that we were changing member data, we had to make sure that everyone was updated on a daily basis about what was going on and about the changes that were being made to ensure that we were able to meet our tight deadline and get these communications out and get this change out as quickly as possible. Then we have the weekly product progress update. So this is for high visibility projects or projects with tons of stakeholders that are not involved in the day-to-day, but also for projects that do have a longer time period of completion. So if you're dealing with multi-quarter projects or even a quarter project, you can go with the weekly. But if you're dealing with something that's less than a month in terms of the timeline you have to develop, I would recommend the daily product update. So what does the daily product update look like? So here are the various components. You have the overview of the product, the project, links to relevant documents within that document. So design links, any requests that you have to make to other teams that you need to track. I would put all this in that same document. And then a day-by-day breakdown by stakeholder of all the tasks that need to be done and any meetings that are currently underway or will be happening, or any important updates that you have for that specific stakeholder. So this could be depending on your project. Usually engineering is always involved. Product. So as a PM, always make sure that you're tracking and you make visible what you're working on as well. So it not only does it just ensures that members or your stakeholders are aware of everything you're doing as well, because there are times where you can actually get some insight from your stakeholders as you're working towards your own goals. And as a PM, you're usually the one who is bugging and trying to get as much, get updates from others. So it's always just for transparency to keep your stakeholders updated with exactly what you're working on as well. Then, design, legal is always an important, depending on your project, they're usually involved, or marketing or UX research. And then with the daily product update, you do want to track your end of week goals. So really ensuring that given the tight deadline of what you're working on, that the end of the week on Monday, the start of the week, you're tracking, okay, what do we need to do by the end of the week? What are our goals that we need to accomplish by the end of this week? And then updating that on a daily basis to make sure that you're getting to that. And how would you send this out, right? So from my perspective, this is more reasonable to be sent out through a daily communication medium like a Slack or Teams or Microsoft Teams, given that people expect to receive daily updates here. Sending a daily update through email, you may end up clogging someone's email. They may not appreciate that too often. And then you can also keep these in a running meeting document, let's say in Google Docs. So on the right-hand side, you'll see just an example of what this could look like. So we have your tasks to do broken down by the stakeholder, end of week goals, and then we have this broken down on a day-to-day basis, and then with a heading of the week that you're working on. Then the weekly product update. So the same, these have similar components, but just broken down on a weekly basis. Right, so your tasks are broken down by stakeholder again. You have an overview of the product, you have links to relevant documents, and then you also want to have your ramp and release updates just so members know exactly, or your stakeholders know exactly how far we are from launching the product and what stages we plan on launching the product as well. And then through what medium? For this one, for me, it makes more sense to send through email, given that people would be okay receiving a weekly document via email. But then also ensuring you're keeping this in a running meeting document so you can keep track of all of the weekly items that are happening throughout the development of this project. And this is something I utilized that helped significantly when I was developing or working on the name pronunciation feature. So I had a running document with all the weekly updates because this was a multi-quarter effort. So if anybody had any questions about what was going on with the product and with the development of the product, you can check this document and see all the updates. And I kept all my stakeholders, my manager, my direct stakeholders, all updated on what was going on. So everyone had a complete transparent view of every aspect of the product development process. So what are some tips that I have before sending out updates? So for the weekly update, something simple is just to create a listserv of all the stakeholders so you don't have to type in every email of every stakeholder every time you send it. The second one, which I feel is very important, is verify all the progress that you noted is actually true, right? So you don't want to commit your teammates to tasks they never agree to. That would erode any trust that they have in you as a PM and your ability to really ensure that you're tracking product progress in an efficient manner. And then the last one is to ensure you have the latest information as of the day time you send it out, because nothing makes people trust your update less then receiving an update on the update you sent from someone else immediately after you send out your update. So really ensuring that you have the latest information as of the date time you send it out. So why are these updates important, right? So as a PM, it just helps keep you organized, right? It helps update everyone on everything happening within the product development process. So there's a ton to remember. I may have a decent memory. I can't remember everything. I mean, everybody has their personal lives. You have family, friends, stuff you're doing outside of work. So really just make sure you write everything down that's happening on a daily or weekly basis. So it's easily to just review and send out updates to anybody else, and just to update yourself as well, because you may forget something that's going on. So the second one, it just forces you to ask questions and listen intently during every conversation. So you have to know as a PM all the ins and outs of essentially everything happening with your product. So if you're able to send this update out and know what's going on with design, with research, with marketing, with legal, this just keeps you honest and ensures that you're able to accurately convey all the necessary updates from all the necessary stakeholders. Then third, it just lets everyone know you're listening. Everyone likes to feel heard, so ensure your team feels heard, because then that helps to build that bond within your team and ensuring that you're all working together towards that same shared goal. And then it just helps promote product progress, right? Everyone loves progress, right? So if you're able to send these updates out, to even if you're just moving incrementally and it's showing that, hey, we're not stalling, we're making progress, and everyone's going to be updated on that progress as in the cadence that you're sending out this update. And then continue with that, it keeps everyone abreast of the product progress. And it kind of, you can cover yourself, right? No one can claim they did not see the 10 updates you sent out at the same time, at the same cadence, through the same medium that you sent it out, right? So it really ensures that everyone is updated on everything that's going on, and that no one can claim that they had no idea what the current product progress was. And then, as I mentioned, it just builds trust within the team. All your stakeholders trust that you're accurately, documenting everything happening within the product, ensuring that you have a successful product launch. So, in summary, product execution equals product success. To facilitate seamless product execution, there are many things we can do. One of them I feel is the excellent product progress communication. There are a couple ways to do this through a daily and weekly product update templates. They aid in successful product progress tracking and communication. And I have some templates available. You can check out the p0pm.com, click on resources, and then you'll see a daily update template and the weekly update template as well. And additionally, there is another item I think you can use is the project tracker. So actually tracking the status of all the tasks that are in progress from design, engineering, marketing, legal, etc., in a spreadsheet. That's something else I will be adding to the resource page, but that's something else to consider. So I've reached my 20 minutes, and any questions? I guess we can go into the Q&A.
Great, thank you so much, Joseph. Questions are welcome both in the chat here in Zoom, or if you're watching us on YouTube or other stream there in the chat as well. I will be reading these questions from the chat. And for people in Zoom, if you're feeling brave, you're welcome also to switch on your microphone and or camera and ask questions here live. I'm very happy to hear real voices as well. I will have a bit of a nerdy question. You mentioned Google Docs that you use for notes and other updates. Have you tried other more fancy tools like Notion or things that many people are super excited about? What do you think about this?
Yeah, so I'm actually in the process. So what I do for my personal like items that I'm tracking, I do use either tasks for Microsoft has a tasks app, or Coda as well. So those are two that I use for personal. The only reason I don't use it for broader consumption is because not everybody uses these tools. So if they don't have easy access on their mobile phone, or if they don't have easy access, if I need to send a link and say, hey, quickly look at this and update, I need to know that it's something that they can use quickly. So if everybody's not using Coda and they're not using, the Microsoft Task, then it just slows down the progress that we can make as a team. And if somebody has to download something, So although these tools may be better suited than a running Google Doc, I try to take into consideration, okay, what is everybody else using? How quickly can everybody else access this information? How easily can they access it? So I know with Google Docs, I know people can access it on their phone, on their laptop, pretty much anywhere, on the go or at home. Although that could be the same for Coda or Microsoft Tasks. If they haven't applied for access to these tools internally, they may not have access to it. So I just try to remove all these potential barriers of errors that could pop up when somebody needs their access to a document.
Makes sense. Cool. Thanks. I see Kate has a question. Yeah, guys, if you have a question in Zoom, please raise your hand. I will see you. Kate, go on.
Hey, so thank you so much for the talk. I was just wondering, so on your templates, it looked like they were mostly text, and I know a lot of people have strong opinions and tendencies to use graphics and stop light or traffic lights and things like that. So I was just wondering in general, like your opinion on how effective one versus the other are, or a combo of both.
Yeah, I guess for me, I just like to be as efficient as possible, as easy as possible. I usually, if I may add color. So like for product, so in my project tracker that I use, or even on the weekly update, if something is completed, I'll just highlight the text in green, like the first few letters of the heading. If it's a blocker, I'll put like red. That's probably as far as I go in terms of adding some color and making it pop a little more. Just because I try to kind of going with what I mentioned earlier, just keep it as simple as possible, make it easy. I don't, if a picture doesn't load, if you get on somebody's phone and they need that picture to understand, what the update is and what it actually means, then that just, adds in confusion, and then they're gonna have to call you or send you a message to understand that. So I try to keep it simple by just mainly using text, but then adding color if it's, yellow, green, red, depending on the item I'm talking about and the progress of that item.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. I see more questions in Zoom, but first I will read some questions from YouTube. Raquel is asking, what advice can you give to someone who is making a career transitioning to PM and has no prior experience with technology? Maybe in a short way. I know there are many questions you can share here.
So there's a few things you can do. I mean, when you say no prior experience with technology, are you mean just not working in a tech firm, but you do use tech, I'm assuming?
I guess everyone does nowadays.
Yeah, I know. So I assume you're familiar with tech. So, I mean, that is, you can say, and it's, although you haven't worked in tech, there are many people who transition from, finance into a tech. I mean, there's a lot of transferable skills that you can use and that you have to ensure that you're able to convey to another individual. So for instance, within product management, there's, working with stakeholders is huge, right? So if in your current role, if you've worked with multiple stakeholders and gotten their input and been the person to synthesize this input to then make a decision, like that's a big part of product management, right? If you've come up with an idea for something based on some user research that you've used, let's say you're in marketing, right? And you've found some research on, let's say you're marketing in CPG, consumer goods, right? And you researched an item and you realize, okay, this is going to be successful in the market and this is why it was going to be successful. Based on this data, you're able to actually convince your manager, convince other stakeholders around the company to go on board with this idea, and you released it. That's another big part of product management, right? Even just effective communication, right? If you've been a project manager and you have worked with many stakeholders to ensure everyone is on the same page with respect to product progress, and you successfully launched or led the launch of a whatever product you're working on, a non-tech product, that's another part of product management. So just ensuring you're able to understand what PMs do and the different aspects of it, and then conveying all your transferable skills into that specific PM role, and then conveying that on your resume and then through your interview processes that you go through.
Great tips. Thanks a lot. Here, Anand, you're welcome to tune in. Don't forget to unmute yourself. You're still muted.
Yeah. Thank you, Joseph, for the wonderful presentation. I have actually two questions to you. So how do you highlight your execution skills during a PM interview? That's the first question. And the second one is like, what are your tips on improving your executional skills as a person? You know.
And so what was the second question? And how to improve execution skills?
Yeah, exactly. How do you improve your execution skills as a person?
So in terms of improving, like I feel like to be a good executor, you have to be very tedious and very detail oriented. And some people may have we're just gonna go with the flow mentality, but in order to execute, you really have to ensure that what you're working on, everyone's on the same page, and even down to the day, the hour, right? It's really just maybe not hour, but just really having that mentality where I need to ensure that I know what's going on, that everybody else knows what's going on, that we're making progress on a day-by-day basis or week-by-week basis, depending on what you're working on. So it's a different mentality you have to kind of take on, where you really have to be focused on specifics, right? Asking, questions to stakeholders. If they're telling you this is going to take 3 weeks, why is this going to take 3 weeks, right? You don't need to know how to fix it, but you just need to know the why behind, okay, this is going to take 3 weeks because of this. And then when you have this in your mind, then as you go on to the next project, if this same thing pops up, you could already predict what's going to happen, how long it'll take for you to complete your project. So it's just really being tedious with respect to that execution process, just wanting to know everything that's happening, why it's happening, and then tracking all of that, right? So being very tedious with tracking as well. So like writing everything down is something I do. I try to write as much down as possible because there's always so much going on. You're working on multiple products, multiple projects. You're not going to remember everything. The times I come home, I start working on Monday from the weekend, and I'm like, okay, what did I do on Friday, right? So just making sure everything's written down, and I think that's something that will help with execution, improving execution. And then your other question in terms of doing that in the interview, so it depends on the interview. Most PM interviews are execution could. I'm trying to think. Most PM interviews, you have like a product design interview, which is more so just product design. It doesn't really talk about how you would go about executing on your product design, but it's just more so coming up with an idea. There may be certain interviews that may be more behavioral in nature, where they actually tell you to tell me about a time where you did XYZ, how did you get through it? And in those, it goes to your behavioral type interview answers where use the what is it, the SMART tactic. Has to be I don't even remember the acronyms, but essentially it has to be like a actionable, you have to have some tactic around it, just ensuring that you're able to convey all of what you had to do, like what was the context around in which you had to do that work, who did you work with, why was this important, what were any roadblocks you overcame, how did you overcome those roadblocks, and then how did you and then was your product successful? So I think if you're just able to convey all of that, that just shows that, hey, this person can execute well because they've noted everything they needed to do, who they needed to work with, any obstacles they had to overcome, why this was important, what the results were. I think that's a way to convey your execution in an interview.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Anand, for the question. I will read a question from YouTube right now. Veronica is asking, I would like to know how you prioritize work, any frameworks you follow. I guess we talk on the day-to-day basis. Of course, there is backlog and you prioritize it, but also on your day-to-day work, how do you know what to do first?
So for day-to-day, a lot of it just depends on the stage of the product I'm in and the importance of the product. So for instance, if I'm developing a strategy for a new feature, but we have a meeting coming up at the end of the week and I have to make sure that strategy is at least done by the end of the week, then that's what I'm going to work on. That's going to be the highest priority for that time. But if let's say I've released a product and I have to track the metrics to make sure that nothing is broken in the ecosystem, then that'll be the first thing I do, right? So it just really depends on what stage of the product I'm in. And if I'm working on multiple products, then let's say I have that strategy document to create and I'm tracking a metric, I will probably just go with them, check out the metric first because that's actually live, right? So that's actually live on the product, making sure that nothing is, issues are occurring on the platform, and then I'll go to something that's not live on the platform. So probably go to what could break things and make an issue for our live members first, and then go to anything else that's maybe more future forward.
How do you ensure that you still work on strategy? Because it's always a trick that there's always many burning questions, right?
Yeah. Then you just have to see what your priorities for your team are, and talk to your manager and see, okay, I have all these things I can work on. What's most important to the team in the short term? What can I put aside on the long term? So I think that's more of a communication with your manager. Or or let's say you are the manager, then you just have to figure out what priorities you have for the company, for your team, right? Understanding, okay, what needs to be done now versus what needs to be done later based on the company objectives, company goals, etc.
Cool, thanks. I hope, Veronica, it was helpful. Alice, please.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Joseph, thank you so much for the presentation. I have actually also 2 questions to you regarding the communication, basically tools or techniques that you have shared with us. And first of all, so basically what you could see is it's a very structured way of communication, right? And I'm wondering, was this something that you developed while being a product manager? So, and if we can see, like, I did a little bit of a research on your background, or is it something that you developed while a product manager, or is it something that you brought from like a corporate environment? And like Intel is a pretty big ass of corporation, right? So is it something that you learned there? So yeah, that's the first question.
I would say the structure and like just being very organized probably came from engineering, because I did school in engineering. So if anybody who's coded anything knows that you have to be very organized, and the order in which you write things, how you write things, how you structure your model, or it's not going to work. And so just going through that process has probably formed my thought process in being very structured, just having to be structured in developing code and writing code in the past. And I've kind of just seen how that benefits just me, and just even outside of coding. And if I'm organizing an event, right? So I used to be a part of my fraternity in school where we organize events, and we were just always very structured. Okay, how do I, like if I'm organizing the event, I'm literally putting myself in the mind of the attendee, going through every step of that attendee's experience in that event, which these are just things that have kind of shaped my mentality and how I think about things, about just being very organized and structured, because it really just helps with keeping you organized and understand, and not flustered, and calm, because everything that's going on, and then it keeps everybody else organized as well. And the latter is the most important, right? You want to make sure that everybody else knows what's going on, because you could be very well updated on and know, hey, everything's fine. But if somebody doesn't see an update for a week, they may think things are breaking, right? So it's really just something I've developed just since school, and I've kind of honed and realized the importance of being very organized and structured to assist you, and then to make sure that everybody else as well knows what's going on. Yeah, there was also a time when I was at Lyft, actually, just giving one thing that made me know really the importance of sending out these updates was because I was talking to my manager, and I was verbally telling him things I was doing, but it still wasn't like, because he had so much going on that it wasn't sticking. All right. So then he was like, hey, just send me an email. All right. So I can review my email, and I have no excuse if you send me an email, basically, right, of everything that's going on. So that was another experience that made me understand the importance of these updates as well.
Nice. Thank you so much. And this was the first question. And the second question is just like related to the first one. So as you just mentioned, it's like it creates like a great deal of transparency in the communication, right? And exposes the stakeholders or like team members to the structured information. What is also important in this process is probably consistency. Is there the way, like the process that you have created for yourselves that, you know, you're sending this product updates like weeklies or like on a certain, I don't know, Friday, 11 a.m. or what is your process around it?
Usually, so for the weeklies, I usually send on Sunday night as I'm kind of like before everybody gets to, you know, starts work on Monday. I'll send like a weekly if that's the product I'm working on. On the daily, it's basically just end of the day, or usually I try to send the end of the day. Sometimes it happens to begin in the morning of the next day where I'll send updates. But so for the weekly, it's usually just Sunday, and then for the daily, it's usually the morning, like when I wake up. I try to, because in tech we start pretty late. So even if I wake up and I send it at like 9, most of the engineers are probably not even awake yet at that time. So yeah, just try to find the time that's best for you, right? So for me, you can send a weekly on a Friday, you know, at the end of the week if you want. That's fine. But I usually just do it beginning of the week so everybody kind of comes into the week knowing what's going on. I feel like it's a different. It becomes a different mind state when it's like, oh, the beginning of the week, I see this update. Okay, we're good to go, as opposed to waiting to the end of the week and then worrying about what's been going on all week. You know, so I think it's a different way to get your stakeholders updated on things.
Yeah, to pull rather than push. Okay, thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you, Alice. And thanks for sharing some more tips in the chat for the STAR method. Okay, Jens, you have a question.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Joseph, for your presentation. Awesome. Also, I don't envy you answering all these questions. Also related to Alice's question, how much time of your daily work do you spend for these updates? Because relates to the second question, if the update is the same on 2 consecutive days, some people already lose interest. So how do you keep your stakeholders interested? What do you do? Should we all take storytelling classes? How do you make it interesting?
No, I think it just depends on the type of product you're working on, and you have to determine the right cadence. So if you're working on a product which isn't changing on a daily basis, then don't send daily updates. So for instance, I was working on a migration that I mentioned of, you know, half our member base basically over a month-and-a-half period. Like that, every day something was changing. Like there was nothing that was consistent in terms of the updates from day to day. So literally every day there's a new update. There was another product I was working on, name pronunciation, where every day there was not an update, so I sent it on a weekly basis, because mostly on the weekly basis there was, you know, new changes. And then, I mean, let's say you're working on maybe there could be a potential where your product is bi-weekly, where there's progress is literally slow enough where you don't have to track it on a weekly basis, where you can track it bi-weekly. So I think it just determines you have to determine maybe as you're working on it, kind of gauging how things are changing and then saying, okay, based on this pace, then I'm going to update it on this cadence. But then that can change based on the stage. So let's say you're about to release, then you may have more daily updates to give, right? So then you may switch to daily from weekly. So it just depends on the product, depends on the stage that you're at as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Jens. Eva, I remember your question, but before that, I take some questions from YouTube. The first one is from Juliana. Do you reference your roadmap in the weekly updates? As in, are you showing progress against certain timeline, or is it more of a general status update? So what's the relationship with the roadmap here?
So the roadmap, so like long-term roadmap? Is that?
I guess, yeah, there is long-term roadmap for your product that you're working on. How do you mention it in certain regular updates? Do you do the roadmap at all? I don't know. The companies do it differently. So what's your approach?
I guess so. My assumption is that, like, if you have this long-term roadmap, then that's going to be, the reason that you're developing this product is to lead towards that roadmap and to assist in your company achieving that long-term goal. So that would most likely be in your like PRD, that strategy of why this product is important for the long-term goal. So I wouldn't necessarily put it in the daily update unless you wanted to put it in like the overview section, just a quick sentence on why this product is important for the.
But what if do you have something like with milestones, like by this month we should do this, and by that something else, like roadmap in this kind of sense?
Oh, roadmap for that product specifically? Like the development of that product?
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess in that case, so for instance, for the daily, we had end of week goals, right? So it's like for the end of the Friday, we need to do this because in order to finish the next milestone, if this isn't done by this date, it's not gonna, the next milestone is gonna get pushed back. So for instance, so in that case, yeah, I would put like I put an end of week goal for every week as the week started to make sure that we're on track towards hitting every milestone within that product roadmap to make sure that we release on time. So if you're going for a weekly basis, then we would, let's say, have an end of month. Okay, by the end of this month, we have to get this engine work done, because if this isn't done by this time, then the next stage in engine work isn't going to get completed. So it's really just determining the major, like working backwards, and determining, are there any date constraints that you have, and then marking those dates to ensure that these are milestones that are met by those dates. Does that help? Hopefully. Sorry.
I hope so, Juliana. Let us know if you have follow-up questions on that, or if that helped. One more question from YouTube. Aniket is asking, when doing weekly or daily follow-ups on the progress, how do you ensure the accountability with the responsible individuals given timeline is a constraint? Any ideas that worked for you?
So I feel, so if everyone is on the same page and dedicated to getting this product released, and if you're publicly stating, hey, these are the tasks that this person needs to do, my hope is that would motivate them, since everybody's aware of their specific tasks that need to be done, right? If you have their name, this person needs to do this, and everybody's aware of it, that would be motivation enough. If that's not the case, then that becomes more of a, okay, how can you, like what other things are, like what about the product or the project is not enticing them to want to, give their all, or dedicate more of their time to it. So then that's a different discussion you need to have, maybe just a one-on-one with that individual and stating, hey, we're making this progress. Maybe things are falling behind. What can we do to make sure that we meet our progress? But in general, at least I've had an opportunity to work with great people, and this has never been like an issue really. So I'm lucky in that sense, but for now. But I know that does happen. In the past, I've definitely been in situations like that. But it really just comes down to the idea, one reason for doing this update and actually sending it out, because it keeps everyone accountable, even yourself, right? If I say I have to do this task by this date, everybody sees it. If you say that this person has to do this task by this date, everybody sees it, right? So it holds people accountable. So hopefully that accountability drives people to actually complete their tasks. If not, then it becomes there's probably something deeper behind that. Maybe they're have other work they're doing that they're swamped with that maybe you don't know, and then maybe this helps change expectations that you have of them and the work they can actually contribute. Or maybe it's something they're just not passionate about the product that they're working on. So it could be a few things.
Okay, great, thanks. I think it was helpful. Aniket, let us know also in the chat if this is what you were looking for, or you have some follow-up questions. Juliana says, thanks for the previous question for the roadmap. So I think what you said, shared, was helpful. Eva here in Zoom, you're welcome to ask your question now.
Well, thank you very much. My question goes back to the uninterested stakeholder part. I had the same pain points when I was working for a very big IT company in my previous job, and I was meeting very uninterested, extremely indifferent stakeholders. And I've tried such approaches like daily update or weekly update, and I've tried group chat they were not reading them. And at some point I was so overwhelmed and all of my soft skills were running out, but you know, product managers also not in the position of you do this, you do that. So I wonder, how would you approach it if you were in that situation?
For that one, that's a tough one. Did you have an opportunity to actually speak with that individual on a one-on-one basis to understand what could be causing the lack of response?
Yeah, I should have. And in the meantime, I was responsible for new initiatives in the company. So I was constantly trying out new things, and it was basically not on the roadmap of anyone. I was just trying to kill my way out of the crowd.
Yeah, I think so the thing when you're dealing with stakeholders who may not be responsive, one thing I would do is just talk to them on a one-on-one basis after you've noticed like trends in a lack of response, just to really understand what's going on, because there could be other things at play, whether it's personal, whether it's maybe lack of clarity on what they needed to do. Maybe they just weren't even expecting to, maybe the work that you gave them, they thought they were doing well and they did, or they thought that they did enough, but you're expecting more out of it. So I think it's really just ensuring everyone's on the same page with respect to expectations from both ends. And then if there's anything that needs to be clarified, clarifying it. And I think just talking one-to-one communication is the best way to go about kind of solving these type of problems, and not like, assuming, and because you never know what they could just be simple. Hey, I've received this from somebody else and they told me to do this, right? And somebody else may have told them something different than what you may have communicated. So I think just talking to one-on-one is like the best way to go about that.
That makes perfect sense. If you could allow me to ask one more follow-up question. So that brings me to this work from home kind of situation when you have to schedule one-on-ones through video but not spontaneous coffee chat. Could you share a bit more insights on how do you go about that?
Yeah, so that one's a little tougher because you don't see people. I tend to just use Slack or Teams, and I just kind of bug people that way. I was like, hey, checking in. That's like my way of coffee chat, right? Just running into you in the office is sending you a Slack message until you respond. But for the most part, I try to just be, nice about it. I'm like, hey, I understand you're busy. Just want to get an update on what's going on. So that's what I use as a way to, get an answer. If you do need something that's urgent, then throwing something on someone's calendar is definitely a better, a more, I don't know, direct way of saying, hey, we have to talk, right? So it just depends on the urgency of your request and how you all communicate in your corporation.
Love that. Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you very much.
So thank you both. That was very interesting discussion, and we have a follow-up question on YouTube on that. Given LinkedIn has a multinational, multicultural mix of stakeholders, any thoughts on conflict resolution?
I mean, I've been lucky enough not to have like crazy conflicts at LinkedIn. But for me in general, I just try to talk to the person. Like I'm just a person, I'm pretty direct, where I'm like, hey, what's going on? What is there any issue? What do we have? Any concern there? And I appreciate when people do that to me as well. It's like, try not to assume anything, assume the best intention and just go into the conversation with your assumption that, they have the best intention. And if you find out they didn't, then that's a different situation. But in terms of conflict resolution, I think just always just approaching the person and in a friendly manner, clearly not in a negative way, but in a way in which that person can be receptive to whatever you're trying to communicate. So that's what I would say. Conflict resolution, the best way for me is just to be one-to-one and just talk to her, just say, hey, is there an issue? We're noticing this. Just want to understand, what's going on, because there could just be miscommunication, honestly. So that's what I would say.
Have you ever noticed that you need to behave a bit differently or communicate a bit differently depending on who's on your team, like from where they come from, culturally and country-wise?
I haven't noticed anything too, at least I haven't in my current role, I haven't noticed any difference that much. People seem to be people are fairly communicative, especially during the pandemic and the fact that everybody's working from home. So people are very pretty responsive. It may be less of a cultural thing, more of just a personal thing. Some individuals may have to ping them more than others. But I feel as if in my current role, everyone is, I haven't had to, I feel, switch what I say based on a, country, in which the person is dealing with, in which the person lives. It's more so just, well, I take that back. There may be some instances where, depending on the time zone, where I may have to communicate more because we just don't overlap, or I may send multiple messages in that sense. But it's less about how I do it and just maybe the frequency with which I have to communicate with them. But in general, I feel like just approaching anybody in a friendly, open way usually helps. And if the person isn't being responsive, then if you have to go to another individual, to maybe another stakeholder involved to get somebody, or a manager to get involved, hopefully you don't have to go to that route. But in general, what I've experienced is, if there are any differences culturally, then you do have to take that into account. But from my personal experience, it's been mainly maybe on the frequency of which I have to kind of remind, like, hey, but that's also just based on the country, and different teams have different ways to communicate with other teams in different countries. So that's probably the only thing I've noticed, is just the frequency with which I have to maybe ping somebody or ping a team.
Well, great. Thanks so much, Joseph. We will be now wrapping up our live stream. Everyone on Zoom is welcome to stay a few more minutes after this official live stream ends. People on YouTube, you may join us on Zoom for a little bit more networking part. And there is a link already in the YouTube chat. Thank you all for coming, joining us on this, listening to the talk and asking questions, for your active participation. Please come to our next events. We have weekly events on Tuesdays. Please check our product management people group on Meetup. If you want to talk more, discuss what you find very interesting today, or if you have more questions on product management, join our community chat on Telegram. It's Get Product People. And if you want to help us run this event with good tools and always having all the latest technology, please support us on Patreon. Also remind you, we Product People are a product management consultancy. So if you know some cool products, cool companies that need a bit of support, interim product manager, let us know. We are very happy to help deliver more great products to this world. Thank you, everyone watching us online. Please stop the live stream, and we stay a bit longer in Zoom.